Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell and welcome to another program on spirituality. I'm very excited today to have my new friend, the Reverend Hampton Mabry, an Anglican priest who is with us today, and we've become friends through the Oblate program at the Benedictine Monastery in Pecos, New Mexico, and he's here to share a little bit of his life and his work, particularly now as a hospice chaplain. So welcome, Reverend Hampton.
Thank you very much, Bill, for the opportunity to be with you. Appreciate it.
And it's fun because when he told me his undergraduate work was in TV and what was it?
My college degree is in radio and television broadcasting, but it's been a long time since I've been in a studio. But this is fun. It was fun to run the camera earlier and kind of reconnect with my roots there.
That's welcome. You do look a little light. I mean, it reminds you of your college days. So this is good. Yeah. So you've just recently moved to Santa Fe in the last few years. You want to tell us about your life and what brought you here and what you're doing?
2 years ago. Well, it was the Oblate program in a way, the monastery that brought my wife and I here. We've been coming to the Pecos Benedictine Monastery for retreats for many years, 30 years for her, 20 for me. And of course, every time we'd come, we'd explore Santa Fe and spend some time in Santa Fe and just really loved it, and we're looking for the opportunity to move here. And 2 years ago, the Lord finally opened the door, and including a job for me here. So here we are after spending all of our lives in Texas. I'm a fifth generation Texan. I don't say that too often, too loudly around New Mexico, but
that's a lot.
But I'm just delighted to have traded the Gulf Coast for the mountains.
That's great. Well, it's been a pleasure to interact with you and your wife Cha a number of times, and I appreciate it. But your background kind of fascinates me. You're my first opportunity to interview an Anglican priest, so we've been a lot of the news in Christianity in general. And tell us about that background, how you got to become a priest.
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in the Methodist Church in a little town in South Texas on the border. In fact, it occurred to me after I moved here, I grew up on the lower Rio Grande Valley, the Rio Grande River flows into the Gulf of Mexico, and it looks like I'll die in the upper Rio Grande Valley. But I grew up in the Methodist Church and discovered the Episcopal Church when I was in high school, and really loved the liturgy, the Eucharist, the more formal kind of worship. And I was confirmed in the church. I think I was 16. Then I went to seminary. Well, I got to seminary, I guess, through, I got my degree in broadcasting at the University of Houston, and was active in the Canterbury Association, which is the college students, Episcopal college students. And I'd finished my 3 years, I was getting ready for my senior year, and sometimes people would say to me, my friends in the Canterbury, well, you ought to be a priest, you'd make a good priest. And said, well, no, I'm going to be a good layman and be the next Walter Cronkite or whatever. You know. But I was going to a summer school class in, I think it was biology or geology at the university, and I was studying for a test. And I was sitting in the student union just studying and wasn't thinking about the church at all. And I heard almost an audible voice. It said, why not be a priest? Well, I kind of looked around, didn't see anyone, but it was so real that I couldn't get the thought out of my mind. So when I got back to my room, I took a seminary catalog off the shelf that someone had given me and thumbed through it and read it. And by the end of the day, I really felt like, well, that's what God was calling me to do. I was a little apprehensive when I went home later in the summer to tell my father, who'd been paying for me for 3 years at college to be a broadcaster. But he said, well, he said, you know, you won't make much money. And I said, well, I really wasn't expecting to make much money in broadcasting either. And then he said, and if you ever get defrocked, you'll always have something else you know how to do. So that was a good way to look at it. But didn't plan on getting defrocked, and fortunately haven't. But I finished my education at University of Houston. I didn't feel ready to go to seminary right out of college. And my rector at my church in Houston said, well, come teach school for us. Had a wonderful day school there. So I had a wonderful 4 years teaching fifth graders at St. Thomas School in Houston. Then went to seminary at the School of Theology of the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee, which is the largest educational institution of the Episcopal Church.
Wow. So the process seemed to be seamless almost. It wasn't any kind of upsetting. Your family was supportive, and there you were. And
yes, as you mentioned, I think that's that's true. It was like God had a. Sometimes we say, almost glibly, God has a plan, whatever that might mean. But there was definitely a plan there that I was was happy to be a part of. And
what was your ordination like?
You know, it was in my home church there in Houston, the church that became my home church, and it was profound. It's very powerful sacrament. And two friends who'd gone to seminary from Houston were we were ordained within a month of each other at different churches. They came to mine, I went to theirs. So, yeah, it was.
Is it analogous in the
moving
Catholic
experience.
Church to when the bishop lays hands on you?
Yes, yeah. Yeah,
Did you feel it at that time?
Absolutely. You're ordained by a bishop. The Episcopal Church believes in apostolic succession. The Episcopal Church is the largest American version of Anglicanism, the churches that came from the Church of England. So I was 20 years a parish priest in the Episcopal Church, serving different parishes. And in the midst of that time, I had joined the Texas National Guard, and through the National Guard, I was able to go for a year of clinical pastoral education at Brooke Army Medical Center. And
where's that located?
CPE, that's at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, the Army's medical center.
Sure.
So it was a wonderful opportunity to learn the chaplaincy and hospital. I'd had a quarter of CPE in seminary, but the whole year at this marvelous hospital with the famous burn ward was a transforming experience.
What years was this? When were you there?
84, 85.
Okay.
84, 85. Then I went back to the parish, but always in my mind was at some point I'd like to be maybe a chaplain, a hospital chaplain. So I was mobilized for Desert Storm and went to Saudi Arabia as chaplain with National Guard Hospital. And when we got home, I was home about a little over a year, I guess, and I think just trying to follow the Lord's guidance. It was time to leave the parish and go into chaplaincy.
Hold on a second. You kind of lost me there for a minute. You did deploy to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
How
right.
long were you in Saudi Arabia, and what was that experience
Oh,
like?
well, we went. We were mobilized the day after Christmas of 19. Forget the year that
Desert Storm took place.
1990, I think it was. And went to Fort Sam for our training. We left to go, when we left to go overseas in early January. We were in Riyadh when it was still Desert Shield. We were there when the war started. Fortunately, it was unlike the wars today. It was a relatively quick war with relatively few casualties. We set up a 300-bed hospital and never took a patient because they had so many more hospitals than they needed because they were prepared for so much more intensive and long, drawn-out conflict. So it was early April when we came back, and I was back in my church in May. Yeah. But June the following year, I made the decision to leave the parish priesthood, and also, I guess, an important decision to leave the Episcopal Church and move into The Episcopal Church is the largest, but there's other Anglican church presences in this country. Sometimes they're called the continuing churches. I'm in the Anglican Diocese of the Holy Cross. There's the Province of Christ the King. There's another of others. More conservative, traditional congregations, I would say. Just felt more at home, more like what the Episcopal Church was when I first went in.
Well, give us an example of what the difference would be, because we see now the Episcopal Church where women were priests and bishops, and even the Catholic woman who's the head of the Episcopal Church now. I can't think of her name off, the former bishop of Nevada. But in the Anglican Church, what's the difference?
I would say most of them, as traditionalists, don't ordain women as priests, though women serve in every other capacity. Some of them do. I think the most important difference is in doctrine, teaching, the basic doctrine of the Church. The doctrines of the Christian Church for Anglicans, Roman Catholics, most Protestants, are summed up in the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed. When we say the creeds, we're saying this is God's truth. This is what we believe. These are grounded in the truths of the Bible, the Holy Trinity, the incarnation of Christ, the virgin birth, and that sort of thing. Something that really bothered me in the Episcopal Church was that there were bishops, one in particular, who went all around the country speaking, who wrote and published books, saying all these things in the creeds aren't true. So to me, it's kind of hard to say you're a Christian if you don't believe that Jesus is human and divine and God in the flesh. And so I thought, well, I don't need to be a part of a church that allows a bishop to decry its doctrines with impunity. So, like I said, I'm just more at home in the Anglican Church now.
So then you start to indicate that you started to make that move from parish work, which you did a lot of and had taught before, now into being more in the chaplaincy work, which assuming you're doing more now. Is that correct?
Right. When I took a leave of absence, kind of a sabbatical, and I was living in the Woodlands, a suburb of Houston. Moved down into Houston, and I was looking for work in the hospital. There are a lot of hospitals in Houston. In the 3 or 4 months that I was actively looking, nothing came up even to apply for, but several different opportunities to apply for work in hospice arose, and there was kind of a clear guidance. Those doors were opening and the others were not. So I interviewed with several hospices. The one I liked the best, which was in Texas City, about halfway between Houston and Galveston. So we served the Texas City, Galveston, NASA Space Center area.
Give us an idea of what the difference.
How much work for them?
Yeah. What type of what's it like to be a hospital chaplain, and then what the work is with hospice as a chaplain?
Oh, okay. Well, in the hospital. Both the team concept is very important, and I think was even more so in the military hospital. The chaplain is expected to be present, be part of the team, be in the emergency room, and so forth. Where's the chaplain if you're not there? So with the medical people, the doctors, the nurses, social workers, chaplains, the aides. All of these make up the team in hospice and in the hospital. In the hospital, you're more kind of room to room. We'll get notices, and someone would like to see a chaplain, or the family would like to see you.
And you could be seeing any denomination, correct? Or, or even non-Christians.
Too, medical chaplains are like military chaplains in the sense that we're endorsed. We have an endorsing agency, our church, but it's understood that we serve anyone who wants to see a chaplain, and so we're interdenominational there, and interfaith for that matter. In the hospital, I found that occasionally I would have kind of long, intensive conversations with people that, and maybe I'd get to see them again and again. Most of the time, the way the hospitals are, one visit with someone was about it, and it might have just been very surface, because you go where the patient wants to go as far as the depth into spiritual questions.
Are you also, like the Catholic chaplain, providing the Eucharist for them, that sort of thing?
Oh, sure.
So
Eucharist and what sacraments,
anointings and that sort
anointing, baptism, even marriage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in hospice, most hospice patients are living in their own home. Or they're living, their home is a nursing home or an assisted living center. So it's a matter of going to where they are and being in their environment instead of in the medical environment. You're kind of rather a guest in their home. And the time that I'm able to spend with patients is often a lot longer visit. Again, stay as long as it seems appropriate. They want you there. And many hospice patients are on the service for a good long time, weeks, months. So you can develop a deeper relationship with the patient and or their family because of that. So it's the team is a critical part of hospice.
Describe
and
the team for us.
Chaplain's a critical part of the team.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, you've got, every hospice has a medical director and an executive director or president. Then there are the nurses, social worker, chaplain, the aides, the home health aides, certified nursing assistants, and all of us work together, and we meet together to go over the patient care, plan of care for each individual patient and families. So each one of us is able to help the other know what needs, what are the needs of the family here. The spiritual needs need to be known by the others as they work with them. The medical situation of the patient I need to understand as I'm working with them. So we hear a lot today the phrase body, mind, and spirit.
Yes.
And I think in medicine it used to be, and still is unfortunately in too many cases, that all or almost all the focus is on the body. and sometimes the rest of the person is forgotten or at least put aside. Whereas I think hospice is kind of the first medical model that looks at the whole person and cares for the whole person and realizes that if you're going to give the best care to a person, you have to be addressing their spirituality, their emotions, their feelings, as well as what's medically wrong there. Because I believe at root we're spiritual beings, body, mind, and spirit, but spirit is primary. Every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, no matter whether they believe that or not, or how far they've gotten away from that. And being made in the image of God, we're primarily spiritual beings. And we express our spirituality with our minds and through our bodies, but addressing the spirituality of anyone, especially a dying patient, is certainly crucial to their care.
Give us some examples of things. I mean, many of us have been through that experience where you've had loved ones, die and pass away, and going through that death process. What advice do you have for family or friends when going to visit someone who they know is terminal?
I think the first thing I would say is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to address. They know that they're dying. When I visit someone, I both concerning their spirituality and concerning just in general their views of things and of their having a terminal illness, I like to find out where they are and where they'd like to go. If you, Bill, go visit a friend who's dying, try to feel that out. If they don't want to talk about dying, if they just want to keep things on the surface, then honor that. But I think most people would be glad to have a friend with whom they can really be honest about their feelings about that they're dying, that they know they've just have this short time, and to have someone to talk with about what's important to them. When a person realizes they're dying, many things that have been on the back burner, so to speak, sometimes including God, come to the front burner. And things that haven't been spoken about or thought about, it's time to. And it helps to have a friend who will do that with them. And we try to encourage family members the same way. You haven't, in a lot of families we see they haven't talked about these things. They haven't, or not just dying, but things, family issues that need to have been discussed that haven't been. Now's the time to do this in a loving and accepting way. The dying person, the family, talk with each other about what you need to do, need to say, so that after the death occurs, you won't have regrets that I didn't say this or do this.
What else should we know about that process? I mean, we're all having to face our own demise at some point. What have you learned for those of us who are not quite there yet, but we can see the handwriting on the wall, it's in front of us? What recommendations would you have for those of us who are nearing the end of their life in the normal sense of the words, and in terms of having that courage and strength to go the distance?
Well, for someone who's a churchgoer, a religious person, I would say dig more deeply into your faith, your beliefs, especially the belief in eternal life and life after death. If you're a skeptic or an agnostic and not sure, it'd be time to explore some different avenues.
I want to share with the people, I don't know how much time we have left, but how we met as both oblates at the Benedictine Monastery in Pecos, and I think it was part of the things we had planned to talk about today, but we got sidetracked, which was the benefit to you. I mean, when you're working with people who are dying all the time and people coming and having difficulties with that, I can imagine, and as a server of people's spiritual needs, you too have to look to your own spiritual needs, and I assume that's part of the reason you became an oblate at the monastery. And I didn't realize that non-Catholics could be a member. I was happy to find that out.
Yes, at least at Pecos, at the Benedictine monastery there, they've always been very welcoming of non-Roman Catholics. I put Roman in front of Catholic because Anglicans like to think that we're Catholic too, but not Roman.
Well, I understand that.
But years ago, even before I started going to Pecos, back in the 80s, they had the school for charismatic spiritual directors. And I think always a third to a half of the people who attended that school were not Roman Catholic. So they've been very accepting and oblate, and maybe explain for the audience, oblate's related to the word oblation, which means a blessing. An oblation is presenting something as an offering or blessing. Right. So an oblate is someone who attaches themselves, sometimes they call third order, to a particular order or monastery in order to offer themselves of service to that monastery or convent, as well as a way of further offering your abilities to God, and as you say, further developing your own spiritual life through being part of the monastery program and retreats and the spirituality that comes from being associated with a monastery like the Pecos Benedictine Monastery. And I guess I think I became an oblate, yes, about the same time I became a hospice chaplain. And one would like to think with 20 years of being a parish priest, I was a spiritual person. But working in hospice has deepened my spirituality and my understanding of religion, of God, of spiritual things, in just such a profound way, because of being with people who are in that position of being on the edge of moving on to the other side. And I've come to realize the other side is just kind of right there, a blink of an eyelash away. You know, there were stories I've heard that I think if I'd heard them before I was involved in hospice, I'd be a little skeptical. I would kind of wonder, you know. But now I'm absolutely sure that people who say they see angels, they see angels.
Right.
It's not the drugs or hallucinating or something. One time I was in a Hispanic home in Houston, very small little living room. The Hispanic families are wonderful about coming together at these times. There must have been 20 or 30 people in this room, while the 90-something-year-old matriarch was in the hospital bed in the living room, and close to the end. She looked up into the corner of the room and she pointed and she said, "Mire, mire, los ángeles, the angels." We all looked up there, of course, and didn't see them. 4-year-old little great-grandson said, "Don't you see them? There's 2 of them."
That's a great story.
They were there.
We've actually run out of time. I want to give you the last minute to say whatever advice you might have to the people at home, in literally just a minute.
Oh, thank you. Well, my advice is, if you know of someone who has a terminal illness, for whom aggressive treatment is no longer going to be of any benefit or help, but just cause more pain and problems, look into hospice. There's the misconception that hospice is just for the last few days of life, or that if I go into hospice, I'm giving up, I'll just die right away. Not at all. If you want no more aggressive treatment, hospice is a wonderful avenue for being cared for in your own home, in your own environment, and for being able to do whatever you feel like doing. I mean, one of our social workers took one of our hospice patients the other day and went fishing. So it's not just for the very end. It can enhance your quality of life until the end.
Well, great. Well, unfortunately, the end has come to the program. We ran out of time, so thanks very much for coming in and filling in for us. And it's always good to learn more about the hospice work and the work that you're doing.
And I'll just have to say, my hospice here in town is Del Corazon Hospice. There's other fine hospices, but they're all of the same wonderful service.
All right, great. So I encourage you at home, if you have loved ones that need the help, be sure and look it up. And you can see Reverend Hampton's credits in the credits. You can look and find him there. So on behalf of everybody here at Spirituality, we want to, on behalf of Reverend Hampton and myself and our director Marshall and our programmer George and our camera people Alana and Alex, want to thank you for viewing, and stay tuned next week at this time for another program on spirituality.